The news had been turned off a few minutes earlier, but the room still seemed to be listening to it. The screen was black now, holding only a faint reflection of the couch, the hallway light, and the glass of water on the small table. He sat there without reaching for anything. All day, his voice had belonged to other people, to students, to emails, to the careful tone of a caregiver trying not to sound tired. Even the small argument had passed through him like weather, leaving no dramatic damage, only a little ache in the chest. By 10:51, the house had begun to breathe again. A pipe shifted somewhere. A door settled. Someone asleep in another room turned softly under a blanket. The glass of water waited, clear and ordinary. For once, nothing asked to be answered right away. The phone could stay quiet a little longer. The living room looked a little different after the television went dark. Not cleaner. Not brighter. Just less crowded. A few minutes before, the room had been full of voices that did not belong there. Reporters speaking quickly. Weather maps. Breaking updates. Someone on a panel talking over someone else. All of it had come through the screen and settled against the walls, as if the whole country had walked in and left its coat on the couch. Now there was only the soft black rectangle of the TV. He could still see himself in it faintly. One shoulder lower than the other. His shirt wrinkled from the day. His face blurred by the reflection, which was almost a kindness. He did not need to see himself clearly. The glass of water sat on the table near his knee. Earlier, he had carried it in for someone else, then forgotten to take it back. The water had lost its cold edge. A few small rings of light trembled on the surface whenever the refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Nothing about it was special. That helped. He had spent the day making sentences useful. In the classroom, he had explained a difficult passage twice, then a third time, more slowly. He had written notes in the margin of a student paper. He had answered an email that began politely and ended with pressure. He had nodded in a meeting where the fluorescent light made everyone look more tired than they wanted to be. Then home. Then the other kind of work. A pharmacy bag on the counter. A reminder tape near the calendar. The careful listening for the change in someone's voice. The way care could make a person gentle and impatient in the same hour, sometimes in the same minute. The argument had not been large. It would not be remembered by anyone else as an argument, maybe. A few clipped words. A tired answer. One sentence spoken too quickly from the kitchen doorway. Then silence, the practical kind, where people still move around each other but do not quite look up. Later, there had been an apology that was not exactly spoken. A blanket pulled higher. A glass placed within reach. A hallway light left on. The house knew these things. It held them without making them into a story. He leaned back against the couch and let his hands rest open on his legs. His phone was somewhere nearby, face down, still holding the names of people who could need something from him. A student. A colleague. A relative. A message that might be ordinary, or might ask for more than he had left. For a moment, he did not pick it up. The room did not correct him. From the hallway came the low sound of sleep behind closed doors. A mattress settling. The faint click of the heating system. Somewhere, a floorboard gave a small complaint and then stopped. These were not beautiful sounds in the usual sense. They were too familiar for that. Too easily missed. But tonight, after the voices on the news, after the careful voice he had used all day, after the small sharpness that had finally softened, the house breathing felt like mercy. Not a grand mercy. Just this one. A room that did not require a reply. A couch holding his weight. A glass of water waiting without meaning anything more than water. The hallway light staying on because someone might need to find their way in the dark. He could feel the evening lowering itself around him. Not fixing anything. Not erasing what had been said. Not pretending that tomorrow would be lighter. Only lowering. The table had a few things on it. A coaster from a campus event. A pair of reading glasses. A folded receipt from the grocery store. The remote, set down at an angle, its buttons shiny from use. These small objects looked almost tender in the dimness, not because they were tender by themselves, but because they had survived the day with him. They were still here. So was he. The thought arrived without force, and it did not ask to become wise. It only passed through the quiet room and settled somewhere near the glass of water. He had been allowed to stop. No one had announced it. No one had granted it. The evening simply opened a small space after everyone had fallen asleep, and for a few minutes he was not a lecturer, not the person in charge, not the one listening for every sound. He was only a man on a couch, sitting in the dark after the news had gone quiet. The house breathed. He breathed with it. He stayed there longer than he had meant to. At first it was only a pause between one task and the next. He would rinse the glass. He would check the lock. He would look at the calendar on the refrigerator and make sure the morning appointment was still written where everyone could see it. He would carry the phone to the bedroom and place it near the charger, because someone might call early. There was always a next thing. But the couch had taken his weight in a quiet way, and the room had changed its mind about needing him. The argument had left small traces, the way a cup can leave a ring even after it has been moved. Not damage. Not anything anyone would mention tomorrow. Just a small mark inside the evening. He could still hear the sentence he had spoken too sharply. It had come out before he could soften it. He had been standing near the kitchen doorway, one hand on the edge of the counter, thinking about tomorrow's lecture, the medication schedule, the unpaid bill in the stack of mail, and the news still murmuring from the living room. Too much had been speaking at once. Then one tired voice answered another. That was all. Afterward, everyone kept doing what needed to be done. A plate was rinsed. A blanket was found. A question about the thermostat was answered. The hallway light was left on because darkness could make the house feel less steady. The day did not break open. It only became quieter around the place where the words had landed. Now the quiet had its own sound. The refrigerator came on, low and steady. Air moved through the vent above the doorway. Outside, a car passed slowly, its tires making a soft wet sound on the street, though he had not noticed any rain. The house held these small noises the way an old hand holds change. He looked toward the hallway. A thin bar of light lay across the floor, stopping just short of the rug. It had been left on a little longer than usual. Not bright enough to disturb anyone. Not dark enough to make the rooms feel abandoned. Somewhere beyond it, the person he cared for was asleep, or close enough to sleep that he did not want to disturb them by checking again. Care could become restless. It could make the hand reach for the doorknob even when nothing was wrong. It could make the ear listen too hard. It could make a person answer before being asked, stand before being called, apologize before anyone had said they were hurt. Tonight, he let the door stay closed. That felt small. It also felt like trust. The glass of water caught the hallway light at its rim. He noticed the curve of it, the little shadow beneath it, the way the water seemed almost still but not entirely. His own breathing changed it. The faintest movement crossed the surface when he exhaled. He had been thirsty for a while and had not noticed. So he reached for it. The glass was room temperature now. Plain. A little heavy near the base. He drank slowly, not because he was trying to be calm, but because his body had finally found a speed that did not belong to the day. One swallow. Then another. The water did not comfort him in any large way. It did not make the argument disappear. It did not make him a better caregiver or a better teacher, or any calmer about the messages waiting in the phone. It was only water. His hand around a glass. His back against the couch. A dark screen in front of him, no longer filling the room with other people's urgency. For a few minutes, that was enough. He thought about the classroom earlier, the rows of faces turned toward him, the student who lingered afterward with a question that was not really about the assignment. He had tried to answer kindly. He had tried to leave enough room for the student not to feel foolish. He had done that kind of work for years, the careful work of making a little space around someone else's uncertainty. Then he had come home with almost no space left around his own. Maybe that was why the quiet felt unfamiliar. Not empty. Unfamiliar. The house breathed again, and this time he heard the pause after it. The soft settling after sound. The way a home at night does not become silent all at once, but slowly gives back the pieces of the day. He set the glass down carefully. The phone lit up once on the table, then went dark again. He saw it from the corner of his eye. A name. Maybe a reminder. Maybe another small need waiting behind the glass. He did not reach for it. Not yet. The mercy was not that nothing needed him. The mercy was that, for this small stretch of night, nothing needed him immediately. The longer he sat there, the less the evening seemed like one piece. It began to separate into small things. The dark television. The hallway light. The glass of water. The low breath of the vent. The couch cushion slowly remembering the shape of him. He had not noticed how tightly he had been holding himself until there was no one left in the room to hold himself for. All day, even in quiet places, he had carried an alertness that did not look like worry from the outside. It looked like being capable. It looked like checking the time, answering clearly, keeping the keys in the same pocket, knowing which prescription needed a refill, remembering which student was struggling, which colleague needed a reply, which relative might call after dinner. It looked ordinary. That was why it was easy to miss. A person could spend years being dependable and still not know where to put the tiredness that came with it. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind that stops the day from moving. Just the thin, steady tiredness that follows someone from room to room, sitting down wherever they sit, standing up whenever they stand. He rubbed one thumb lightly against the side of the glass. The water inside had become almost the same temperature as the room. There was something gentle about that. It had stopped trying to be cold. It had simply become what the room allowed it to become. He thought of the small argument again, but the edge had begun to soften. The words were still there. He could still feel the quickness of his own tone, the look that followed, the way silence gathered itself afterward. But now, from the couch, it seemed less like a failure and more like one tired moment inside a house full of tired people. No one had been cruel. No one had known how to be graceful at exactly the right second. That happened. The hallway light stayed on, patient and pale. It made the edges of the room visible without waking the house. Shoes near the entryway. A folded throw over the arm of the chair. A book left open face down, though no one would admit to bending the spine that way. The remote still angled toward the television, as if the noise might start again by itself. He did not want it to start again. Not yet. The quiet after the news was not the same as ordinary quiet. It had a different weight. It came after too many headlines, too many urgent voices, too many reminders that the world was still moving faster than the heart could follow. When he turned the television off, the silence did not arrive all at once. First there was the little electronic click. Then the screen dimming. Then the sudden awareness of the room beneath it all, still here, still holding its own small life. The house had been waiting underneath the noise. Maybe he had, too. He looked down at his hands. They were not doing anything. That, by itself, felt almost unfamiliar. His hands were used to holding books, papers, grocery bags, pill bottles, a steering wheel, a coffee mug gone cold, the edge of a countertop while he listened to someone else speak. Now they were resting. There was no ceremony in it. One hand near the glass. One hand open on his leg. A wedding band, or the pale mark where one had been, catching a little light when he moved. Small signs of a life that had asked to be carried in pieces. The house breathed again. This time he did not try to name the sound. It was a mix of things: old wood, warm pipes, air shifting, someone turning in sleep, the soft mechanical patience of appliances doing their small work in the dark. It was not silence. It was company. He let that company be enough for the moment. The room did not need him to improve it. The people behind the closed doors did not need him to check on them again. The argument did not need to be solved one more time in his mind. Even the phone, still near him, could wait. Soon he would carry it to the bedroom. Soon it would lie beside the bed, face up or face down, holding its little square of possible interruption. Soon he might see the unread message and feel the old habit rise in his chest. But not yet. For now, he sat inside the small mercy of not answering. The glass of water gave back the hallway light. The couch held him without question. The television stayed dark. And the room, ordinary as it was, seemed to make a little space around his breathing. He did not know when the room became a place of rest. It was not when he turned off the television. It was not when the last bedroom door closed. It was not when the house stopped needing conversation. Those things had only made the quiet possible. Rest came more slowly. It came after his shoulders understood what the evening already knew. It came after his breath stopped preparing an answer. It came after the small argument lost its sharp outline and became one more human thing inside a long day. He looked at the glass again. There was a fingerprint near the rim. Maybe his. Maybe someone else's. A small cloudy place where a hand had reached without thinking. The table held it without caring whose it was. That felt like the whole room tonight. Nothing was asking to be sorted perfectly. The couch did not ask whether he had been patient enough. The dark television did not replay the sentence he wished he had said differently. The hallway light did not turn itself into a sign. It only stayed on, soft and practical, because someone had left it that way. A mercy can be very plain. Sometimes it looks like a room where no one is talking anymore. Sometimes it sounds like the refrigerator starting again after a long pause. Sometimes it is only a glass of water that still has enough in it. He had grown used to rest arriving with permission from somewhere else. After grades were finished. After the appointment. After the dishes. After the person he cared for had fallen asleep and stayed asleep. After the message was answered. After his own mind stopped making a list. But tonight, rest did not wait for the list to end. It found him in the middle of what was unfinished. The grocery receipt was still folded near the remote. There were dishes in the sink, probably. Tomorrow's lecture notes were in his bag, not as polished as he wanted them to be. His phone still held whatever it held. The morning would still come with its small demands, its traffic, its questions, its careful voices. And still, the room had made space. He did not have to earn this exact minute. That thought was so quiet he almost missed it. He shifted his feet on the rug. The floor was cool through his socks. Somewhere in the wall, a pipe gave one small knock, then went quiet again. The sound moved through the room and disappeared without needing anyone to check it. He liked that. A sound could happen and pass. A feeling could happen and pass. A hard moment could move through a house without becoming the whole house. The argument had been real. The tiredness was real. The care was real, too. All of it could sit in the same room without one part having to explain the others. He took another sip of water. It was not cold anymore, but it met him where he was. Not fresh from the tap. Not perfect. Just there. His body seemed to understand before his thoughts did. His jaw loosened. His hands rested again. His back sank one small inch deeper into the cushion, as if the couch had been waiting for him to stop holding himself apart from it. There was a life in that kind of stopping. Not a better life. Just life, felt again. The university, the caregiving, the apology half spoken through small gestures, the hallway light, the phone face down beside him, the house settling around sleeping people, all of it belonged to the same ordinary night. None of it needed to become a lesson. It only needed to be allowed to be there without more noise poured over it. He listened. The house breathed in its uneven way. A vent sighed. Wood settled. Far away, maybe outside, a car door closed with care. The sound was small enough not to wake anyone. Then there was the quiet after. He had spent so much of the day helping other people cross their own difficult spaces. A student unsure of a sentence. A loved one moving through discomfort. A family member needing his patience. A room full of adults waiting for him to know what came next. Here, no one needed him to know. The room already knew how to be a room. The water already knew how to wait in the glass. The hallway light already knew how to stay on a little longer. And he, tired as he was, did not have to turn his tiredness into proof of anything. He could sit with it. He could let it have the couch beside him, the dim light, the quiet edges of the room. For a moment, the mercy was not being rescued from the day. It was being left alone gently inside it. After a while, he stood up. Not quickly. The room seemed to notice the movement before he did. The couch rose a little behind him, letting go of the shape it had been holding. The glass of water waited on the table, half full now, with the hallway light caught on its side. The dark television kept its faint reflection of the room, but he did not look at himself this time. He picked up the glass first. It had become part of the quiet. In the kitchen, he did not turn on the overhead light. There was enough light from the hallway, enough to see the sink, the edge of the counter, the small pile of dishes he had not finished. A spoon rested in a bowl. A towel hung crookedly from the oven handle. The pharmacy bag was still there, folded once at the top, the receipt tucked inside. The house did not look finished. That was all right. He set the glass near the sink, then changed his mind and carried it with him. There was still water in it. Someone might want it later. He might want it later. The reason did not matter much. He walked back through the living room slowly. The news was gone now. Not just off, but gone from the room in the way sound finally leaves after enough quiet has come behind it. The couch, the table, the reading glasses, the folded receipt, the dark remote, all of them had returned to being small things. Ordinary things. He passed the hallway light and left it on. There was a softness in that small choice, though he did not name it. Not everything had to be corrected before sleep. Not every light had to be turned off. Some rooms could remain gently prepared for whoever might wake in the night and need to cross the floor without fear of the dark. Behind one door, someone breathed in the loose rhythm of sleep. Behind another, the room was still. He paused there, listening the way he always did, letting his ear search for what was wrong. Nothing was wrong. Or at least, nothing was calling him. That was enough for this hour. His phone was in his hand now. He did not remember picking it up from the table, only feeling its familiar weight. Even silent, it carried its own kind of voice. It held the day in it. Messages. Reminders. A calendar alert waiting for morning. The small blue-white possibility that someone somewhere needed a response. He carried it to the bedroom. The room was dim, with only the spill of hallway light at the door. The bed was unmade on his side, the blanket turned back from a morning that had started too early. A book sat on the nightstand with a pen laid across it. There was a pair of socks near the chair, one folded into itself, one not. Nothing was ready. Still, the room received him. He set the glass of water beside the bed. The sound it made against the nightstand was very small. Then he placed the phone next to it, screen down. For a moment, his hand stayed there. The old habit rose. Turn it over. Check once. Make sure there is no message that matters. Make sure no one is waiting. Make sure the world has not asked something while he was resting. He did not turn it over. The phone stayed unanswered beside the bed, and the relief of that was almost too private to call relief. It did not feel brave. It did not feel like a decision. It felt more like setting down a bag after carrying it for so long that the hand had forgotten what empty felt like. He sat on the edge of the bed. From there, he could still see the faint hallway light. It made a narrow path across the floor and stopped near his shoes. The living room was out of sight now, but he could feel it behind him, quieter than before, holding the dark television and the couch and the last shape of his sitting. The house breathed again. Here, the sound was lower. More distant. A vent moving air. A soft shift in the wall. Someone asleep. The refrigerator, far away, doing its patient work. He let his shoulders fall. There was no announcement inside him. No great peace. Only the absence of the next immediate thing. Only the strange, kind space that appears when the day has stopped reaching for the sleeve. He had not fixed the argument. He had not answered every message. He had not become less tired. But he had crossed from the living room to the bed with the glass of water in his hand, and the house had stayed with him. It had not asked him to explain why his voice had been sharp, or why his patience had run thin, or why rest felt so difficult to accept. The phone remained dark. The water waited. The hallway light stayed on a little longer. He sat there, not quite ready to sleep, but no longer standing inside the noise of the day. And in that small, unfinished quiet, the mercy was simple. He was allowed to stop before everything was done. He did not turn the phone over. After a while, even the urge to check it became quieter. It was still there, somewhere near the edge of him, but it no longer stood in the center of the room. The glass of water caught the hallway light. A small pale line moved across its side when he shifted on the bed. Beyond the door, the house kept making its patient sounds, the vent, the floor, someone sleeping, the low hum from the kitchen. Nothing had become perfect. The words from earlier still belonged to the evening. Tomorrow still waited with its appointments, papers, messages, and small needs. But for this little stretch of night, he was not being called back into usefulness. He lay down slowly. The phone stayed dark. The water waited beside him. And the house, ordinary and unfinished, held one quiet mercy without asking him to explain it.